Hello, I'm Sydney, and welcome back to my Flock and Squawk. It has been a while, but today we are getting back into it with a look into the past. So if you've seen some of my channel, you may know that I have an interest in vintage fashion and cooking and, activities such as sewing. But today we are going to look into the world of dating PSAs. These were, at least the ones that we're looking at, were made in the about 1950s and are about dating, and they are directed at teenagers. I believe that some of them might have been played in schools. They just have that sort of PSA type of content. So the first one you're going to be looking at is how to date. So let us get into it. It has been a while, so please forgive me if I am rusty, but here we go. So this first video is brought to us by Encyclopedia Britannica, which I did not know made films, but this is apparently what they did back in the 1950s or so. So let's take a look. It's called Beginning to Date.
A new event, a first-time experience, is about to confront the students of Lincoln School. The Teen Club is organizing a community house, a new kind of party.
Gee, things are happening. Oh.
So first off, I think it's interesting that they're starting in a school. This is directed at teenagers, but they're starting at a school with a dance, and now dances are still pretty common, although I assume COVID has wiped them out, but at least when I went to school a few years ago, dances were common, so at least in that regard, it is still topical, maybe. I don't really remember us putting up posters like this. It was just sort of like, oh, it's coming up, not like a gathering around of being like, oh, the dance, it's coming. So, let's get further in.
And look, a real party for a change. Dave!
Let's go together, Cindy.
Well, how do you know somebody isn't going to ask to take?
Oh, do you think somebody might? Oh, golly, I'd be scared to death. Maybe we better go together, Cindy.
Hey, George, how about it? You and your date. Who you going to ask?
Me? I don't like parties. I am not.
Yeah, too.
I am not.
Hi, boys.
Hi, Coach.
What's the big argument?
Oh, Bill's kidding George. He says he's scared to ask a girl to the winter party.
You scared to make a date, George?
I never asked a girl to anything.
Maybe you haven't, but you'll be wanting to someday. Look at it this way. Remember the first time you ever dived? Remember how you just knew you couldn't make that first plunge? But you did. After that, it was easy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's all right as far as diving goes.
But gosh, dating's different.
Sure, but you'll want to date someday, George. It's easier here where you know everyone so well. Later on it may be harder. Like taking your first plunge from the high dive.
Diving into the social swim is a lot easier than it seems. It's just a matter of following a few very simple rules of etiquette, a matter, too, of having a little courage.
So at least starting off with the diving metaphor, I feel like that's very, relevant. I feel like nothing has really changed on that front. And I kind of agree that, it's sort of courage and a little bit of etiquette. You don't just always go up to someone with a punchline. Maybe you do, but at least in the world that I know, you kind of, got to be smooth about it. Not everyone is looking for a dick pic, guys. So, you can't always just whip out your guns and see where that takes you. But, a little social etiquette and a little courage. Maybe you need to ask or make the first step. Although it is directed at boys making the first step, people make the first step all the time. It doesn't really matter whose role it is today. But but I do think it's interesting that it's focusing on the guy's part about beginning to date. So let's see further.
After a morning of thinking it over, George decides to take the plunge.
Sorry. Hiya, Mildred.
Hi.
How'd you like Skip Davis's poster? Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, pretty good.
Ought to be a nice party. Maybe with a floor show and all.
Yeah, sure will.
Would you like to go?
Huh?
I mean, would you like to go to the party?
You mean with you? Why, I guess so. That'd be okay. Sure. I'll have to ask at home, of course.
Okay, I'll check with you at school tomorrow.
So, let's just take a moment to reflect on that. I think it is kind of funny that they added like a meet cute kind of moment, because that is something that you see a lot in like rom-coms, especially like Hallmark style movies. Which, don't get me wrong, super cute to watch in a movie, but kind of funny to have it in a PSA. This is Radar. Kind of funny to have it in a PSA from the 50s, but I do think it's really sweet that they kind of incorporated it into like a more natural conversation moment. But it's kind of funny the direction that they've given the girl in this, Mildred. I think it's just really funny that they have her sort of think things through out loud and be like, gee, well, I guess. Sure, that sounds fine. But good for him. I feel like that was still a relevant, like, way that you could ask someone out without it being weird or, like, sexist or something. Like, this is supposed to be, like, high school, middle school kids, I believe, at least from what they look like or what they're dressed like, but I think it's very cute so far, and nothing that's horribly offensive, but I gotta say, like, so far I'm kind of impressed with it being, like, still relevant ideas. Like, it isn't completely, like, far-fetched that this wouldn't happen today. Like, this seems like something, if COVID wasn't ramping up, or even if your kids are still in school, I feel like this could be, like, a potential, still relevant way that someone might be asked out. Like, it was a moment where he helped her with her papers, and then was like, hey, you know, did you see the poster? It was done really nice by this guy. Like, would you want to go? So I'd say that seems pretty relevant. It seems good. Let's continue on.
Fine. Bye.
Bye.
George did make the date. Awkward maybe, but the date is made. Here's Bill ready to make the plunge. Let's see how well he does it.
Hello?
Hi, Helen. What are you doing Friday night?
Yes? Yes? Who is this?
Why, it's Bill. Bill Jenkins.
Oh, Bill. Well, hello.
I was just wondering if you're busy Friday night.
Friday night? Why,
No, Bill didn't do very well. First mistake, to think that everybody recognizes his voice. Second mistake, is it fair to extend an invitation without telling what it's all about?
So, like the narrator just said, Bill didn't introduce himself on the phone, which I feel like in a world where we have, like, caller ID, it might not be as big of a problem. But in this instance, or if you don't, like, have their number saved, I assume that it would be appropriate. Even, like, via text, I feel like it's sometimes appropriate to put who it's from, especially if you haven't really texted them a lot. So, you know, that's a fair point. And then, assuming that they have, or, like, in asking what they're doing on a Friday without asking or telling them why you're asking, seems like a nitpick. I assume that the assumption is being made that she probably doesn't have anything going on Friday that would conflict with the dance on Bill's part. But I don't really see how, like, that could be... Well, I feel like it's just a nitpick on this part, especially since it's like, this is a teenager trying to ask a girl out on a date. But I do think it's fair to say, like, in general, you might want to preface what you are asking them about, especially if you aren't, like, close friends with them. Because this might just seem, like, out of the blue, like, what do you have going on Friday? And it's like, whoa, calm down, like, we only spend a couple classes together a week. So, in that regard, it kind of makes sense, but it's not, like, out of the blue for someone to ask of, like, what are you doing on Friday? Like, what are your weekend plans? Without any, like, intent to ask you to do something. At least in my world, like, someone might be like, hey, what's your weekend look like? And not necessarily meaning to invite you out on something, so I don't feel like it's necessarily the best assumption. But I do feel like, you know, hey, like, I saw the poster for the dance. Are you interested in going? What are your Friday plans, kind of thing? That kind of makes sense, especially maybe for this kind of PSA for teenagers learning social etiquette. Like, it might be more appropriate to be like, hey, you might want to preface if you're asking them to do something. So, I feel like everything so far has been pretty good advice, pretty tame. Nothing, like, overtly sexist, nothing, like, crazy. The only thing is that might be seen as kind of sexist or odd is the emphasis on that the boy is asking. It's not like if you are a girl, how you might go about doing this also. It's only showing two brothers, like, perspectives. It's not showing, like, a brother and a sister equally asking a date out. So, but that was the 50s. It was more of the stereotypical boys do this. So, let's see further.
Bill seems to realize that he did it the wrong way. Let's give him another chance.
Hello?
Hi, Helen. It's Bill Jenkins.
Oh, hello, Bill. Fine. What's new?
Say, the teen club's giving a party in the community house Friday night. Would you like to go with me?
Oh, gee, thanks. That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah? Oh, I don't know. Did you know whether or not Barbara's going? I suppose so.
Hold it. This is getting embarrassing for both of them. They don't know how to stop. The rule here is that the girl declines or accepts an invitation briefly and then says goodbye. If Helen had been older, she might have handled the telephone conversation something like this.
So I'm just going to stop it there before they show the alternate version. I just think it's kind of odd, but kind of interesting that they are talking about how you need to basically say, yep, okay, see you Friday, bye, and not, like, anything further. Because I feel like there might be a conversation there to be had of, like, so am I meeting you at the community center, or, you know, that sort of thing. Like, how formal is the event? I feel like some explanation beyond, like, sure, bye is pretty good, so. But let's see this alternate version that they're proposing.
Hello?
Hi, Ellen. It's Bill Jenkins.
Oh, hello, Bill.
Say, the teen club's giving a party at the community house Friday night. Would you like to go with me?
Oh, yes, thanks. That sounds like a lot of fun.
The party starts at 7:30. I'll call for you about 10 after.
Fine, Bill. I'll be looking forward to it. Bye.
Okay, so they did sort of add a preface of what time it was and what time he'd call. But, you know, I feel like just saying, okay, bye, is just not enough. And you do kind of need that extra context of, like, when it is, where it is, how you're getting there. Oops. So let's watch more and see if there's anything else interesting in the commentary or in the scenes that they're playing.
Well, here it is, the dance night. Bill is well groomed. That's the first step. His next problem is what to say when he gets to Helen's door. Bill wonders who's going to open the door.
How do you do? I'm Bill Jenkins. I've come to call for Helen.
Oh, yes. How do you do?
Nice
We've
start.
been expecting you.
Now let's do it again, and suppose that Helen had opened the door.
Hi, Helen. Gee, you look nice.
Well, thank you. Do you like my new dress?
Yeah.
Well, come on in.
That was a natural. Any honest compliment is tops in date etiquette.
Bill, this is my mother.
Helen slipped up on her introduction. The rule here is the younger person is always presented to the older person. Try it.
So, we just showed the two options of the door opening, but the introduction thing I think is kind of interesting. You're only supposed to introduce you're supposed to introduce the older to the younger, I believe they said, but I feel like that's sort of a moot point at this time. Like, you don't just go, okay, so-and-so's older, therefore I need to introduce people this way. It's not necessarily how we introduce people nowadays. But I think that's kind of, interesting that there's like a social hierarchy to introductions. Whereas today there's like no real worry. You might want to be like, oh, I need to introduce like these people first, but not necessarily like their age dictates this. So let's watch further.
Again, Helen.
Mother, this is my friend, Bill Jenkins.
Hello, Bill. How do you do?
Father, this is Bill Jenkins. He caddies at the municipal golf course. Maybe you've seen him there sometimes.
How do you do, Bill?
How do you do?
Good. And Helen, by mentioning Bill's job, has started a lively conversation. But not every boy is as lucky as Bill. Let's see how his friend Dwight is making out.
So I'm just going to pause it, and I do think it's interesting that they're like, yes, give context. Tell them your date's job, and that can spark a conversation with your father. I think, that might be important to some people of, like, if you give context on where you know them from, it might help introduce them to your parents or introduce them to your social group of, like, that gives context on how you know each other and kind of helps bridge the gap of, like, what are they doing together? Like, how could they have possibly met? Of course, like, it's pretty obvious that these are school children and they met at school, but I do think it's kind of, like, an interesting to be, like, give context, tell them where they work or, like, some sort of detail so that way they can have a conversation. And it's like, not everyone needs to know everything or have an idea to have, like, a conversation. But I do think that's kind of interesting of, like, if you're introducing them to a group they definitely do not know, maybe a little context would help. I feel like that's something that happens today even, so let's see.
Dwight here is obviously on the spot. No one is being helpful. What do you talk about in a situation like this, he wonders? The weather? Pictures on the wall? What? The only thing on his mind right now is the party he's going to. Why not say something about the party?
The party's going to be fine tonight. There's going to be a floor show. A couple of 8th grade kids are going to get some invitations. There's a good piano player, too.
Dwight found a good topic for conversation. You may wonder what to talk about all evening on a date. The secret of easy conversation is getting off to a good start. And here, the girl can often take the lead.
My, did Mother and I have a time at the hairdresser's today? Oh, it was so funny.
Do
you think this is a good start? Hardly. What does Dwight know about hairdressing problems?
So I'm going to pause it right there, but it's like, the one thing that women can do, now that's talk. That's kind of what they brought up at the phone conversation also of, like, don't linger too long, say thanks, and bye. But now they're like, you can start the conversation, but get it off to the right start by not talking about the hairdresser. Talk about something that he will understand and he will have opinions on. Which isn't the best, but I do think that maybe the concept of being mindful about your conversation and how to start it. And, like, I kind of do agree with, the right topic can help lead a conversation smoothly, can help bring on more conversation, because if you're just like about the weather, it might not lead into something more meaningful. It might, don't get me wrong, but like thinking about a topic that might both interest you or kind of get to know them better, I don't see why that could be wrong. It's just sort of interesting that they frame it of like, a woman can talk. Now, but pick a good conversation topic. You don't want to alienate him. He knows nothing of hairdressing. So, let's get back into it.
Now, here's a good way of selecting subjects for conversation. George is thinking about them beforehand. George has chosen a good topic. It seems that Mildred enjoys telling about her new puppy.
So it just showed, like, I believe it was Bill thinking about topics of conversation before his date. And I feel like that makes sense. It's relevant. And I do, like, think it's kind of funny of, like, oh, he picked a good one. She likes talking about her dog. But, like, I feel like there's nothing wrong with advising people to think of stuff beforehand. Overall, I feel kind of impressed, other than, like, women talk. So, let's just see how the party plays out.
Here they are at the party. Bill is right on hand to wait for Helen. But poor Joan. Her date, Tom, has committed the unforgivable error of leaving his partner stranded.
He's committed the error of being a boy,
One of the
playing in
secrets
the
of
coat
having
closet.
a good time at a party lies in trying to see that others have a good time. And while it's certainly reasonable and fun to relax for a while and just stand around, nevertheless, all boy huddles and all girl huddles carried on too long can get to be a bore.
I'm pretty sure all of my
Crossing
dances that I went
wide
to
dance
stayed
floor
in the huddles
and
around
asking
the
a girl
room.
to dance can seem frightening, but then so did that first dive. Here's an opportunity for Pete and Morris to break up this deadlock, to make the party fun. It's also a chance for them to add to their skill in friendly relations. For party skill, like diving skill, is gained by just one thing: by practice and more practice.
Practice and more practice. Well, I guess they're not wrong.
An efficient committee helps to make a party a success by thinking of those who are interested in other things than dancing.
Well, I guess I didn't have good party committees. For a second, I thought that she just stole his drink out of his hand, but I guess he was handing it to her.
Always part of the etiquette of dating is the problem of getting home on time. This is the responsibility of both boys and girls alike.
Oh, gosh.
So let's just take a moment. Boys' responsibility. Ask them out on the date. Meet their parents and be polite conversation. Think of things to talk about beforehand as boys and girls. Girls, talk too much. Don't talk too much long on the phone. Both of them, get home on time. Your father may never let you go out again should you not get home on time. It's your date and your responsibility. Make sure you're watching the clock. I don't see wristwatches on either of these children's arms. But, keep on time.
Better be thinking about my deadline, George. You know parents. I have to be home by 10:15.
Never mind, he's wearing a watch, but I like that she calls it a deadline. Like, this little girl is on a business trip. Like, oh, I've got to meet the deadline. My paper needs to be due to my boss, Dad. Return me unscathed.
Nor else.
Yes, we'd have to leave right now if we want to make your house walking. But I made a deal with Bill's dad for a ride. We've got at least another 15 minutes.
Oh, fine.
Good night, Mr. Jenkins, and thanks for the lift.
Bye. Night.
Good night, George. Good night, Mildred.
Bye.
George sees Mildred right to her door. Mildred remembers to express her appreciation.
Gosh, thanks a lot, George. I had a wonderful time.
Add it to the list. Express your appreciation. Boys, walk her to the door after you get a borrowed ride.
Okay, I enjoyed it very much, too. See you in school.
Okay, good night.
Night.
And George remembers to wait until she's safely inside. And so George's first plunge into the social swim comes to a successful end. It wasn't too difficult. All it required was a little courage and following a few simple rules of etiquette. Rules which are based on just one thing: consideration for the feelings of others. Politeness comes naturally when we are considerate. Lack of consideration can spoil our partner's good time. Planning things in advance can be a wise move, too, whether it has to do with what to talk about or when to go home. By following these simple rules, all dating can be fun.
And with that, all dating can be fun. So I think that was pretty interesting to look into, and honestly, a lot of the things that they presented about dating, I feel like, are still relevant to an extent. Like, you might not ask your date out on a phone call, you might schedule something in a dating app. You might not know them from school, but it does take a bit of courage to be like, hey, you're attractive, or hey, we have good conversations. Why don't we go get something to drink? Oh, I see that, there's something coming up. Would you be interested? Are you free on Friday if we, want to go try something? And, thinking of stuff beforehand, whether it's conversation, time to go home, what to do, I feel like those are all pretty relevant. Honestly, I feel like this is a pretty tame topic, considering some of the sexist and racist and horrific things that went on in the private lives of people and in the public lives of people back in the 50s and 40s. So overall, I think this is sort of an interesting point to look into. And I think that we will look into more vintage PSAs. This is directed at teenagers. And, I feel like that gives quite a few good social points. We might try and find some from earlier and then maybe look at some from, the 70s or 80s to see if there's, dating PSAs or, other material directed at teenagers to compare this to. But overall, I'd say this isn't bad. I mean, it's not necessarily the best advice for, today's standards of, how dating works in, a digital age. Today's PSA might be, be wary of their social media. It might be a catfish. Make sure you have a phone call or Neve and Ned will have to investigate. That sort of thing. But the ideas of, make a plan, taking that first step, being courteous to them and whoever they may introduce you to, whether it's friends or family. I feel like those are all good social points and, have something to talk about. Not really the worst advice that they could have been giving to kids and teenagers in the 50s. With all that being said about this vintage PSA, I hope you had a great time going through it like I did, and we can talk more about this in the comments below. But feel free to let me know what you would like me to look into, what recipes you would like me to make next, and what sewing project you might like to see more of. I am working on a couple long-term projects that are similar to my 1 month of a flip phone, so if you're interested in maybe seeing some of those in the future, please check it out in my channel and subscribe if you want to. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching. and I hope you come to Flock and Squawk with me again some other time.